DJ Lagway gets hurt. That's the headline for Florida. Georgia, Carson Beck throws 3 interceptions. The Bulldogs looked pretty bad in this game. And this game is tied at 20 with 5 minutes to go. And at this point, Florida is playing a preferred walk-on who transferred from Yale at quarterback, Aiden Warner, who, given the circumstances, I thought did an okay job. Now, when Texas has an entire week to prepare for him, I am a little worried about how that's going to go. But I will say, Florida's offensive line was pushing Georgia's defensive line around there in the fourth quarter. When Florida was running the ball, they were getting good yardage. How worried are we about Georgia?
There's a lot to unpack in this game. First of all, I want to say thank you to Georgia for hitting the 4th leg on a 14 parlay. Thank you for doing that for me, because that was an electric cover. Because like if you had 13.5, I bought it down, and that was just not. They did not deserve to win that game by 2 scores. Andy, the thing that is really interesting to me about this game more than anything, and we got to talk about Billy Napier, because I think this is a very fascinating scenario.
We definitely do.
Like, how did Georgia find itself in a game without Lagway for 3 quarters? Like, that was so bizarre to me.
And I will tell you, I will tell you how, from the Florida side, Florida's line of scrimmage play has improved dramatically as the season has gone on. Offensive and defensive lines, they're just better than they were. Then when you and I were at the Swamp for the game against Miami,
and it was bad.
They couldn't do anything on either side of the ball on the line of scrimmage. They're much better now than they were. That said, if you're Georgia, who we just saw dominating Texas's offensive line, which has a bunch of NFL players on it, that should not be happening to you.
I just don't understand with Georgia how you could look so amazing and so poor in like a 2-week period or a 3-week period. And it's like the thing with Georgia that is so interesting to me is that it's there. Like if they play to the best of their ability, it is there. They could win a national championship. They also could lose to a lot of teams, a lot more than they could during their 2 national championships under Kirby Smart. It's like a strange. Carson Beck threw 3 picks. Like, they just did not look like they were into the game. And it's like, for your Mr. Halftime speech, Kirby, like, that's the one thing that is just concerning, because you can't be sleepwalking in a rivalry game. Like, did they just think they were going to kick their ass and didn't show up today? Or like,
that's what I'm wondering, because they play Ole Miss next week in Oxford. About JLab, which is teaming up with a bunch of our favorite college football players, including Quinshon Judkins and Will Howard, who won at Penn State today, and also Travis Hunter, who Ari and I believe both think is the best player in the country. These football stars embody JLab's core values of innovation, performance, and excellence. Just as JLab pushes the boundaries of audio technology, these athletes redefine their sport with skill and dedication. Whether you're traveling to watch your favorite team or streaming the game on your mobile device, JLab has you covered with all the best headphones. Find the blue box at retailers near you or visit jlab.com. And we'll talk about Ole Miss in a second, but you saw Ole Miss just crush Arkansas today. So maybe you're like, oh, but that's not how they spent the week. They spent the week preparing for Florida, knowing, I mean, they had an open date before this one. So now I know they were experimenting with offensive line lineups because they got Tate Ratledge back for the first time since the Kentucky game. And they were moving pieces around, trying different looks there. But that doesn't explain how the defensive line was getting pushed around in the fourth quarter by Florida's offensive line. Like, that shouldn't happen based on what we know about the personnel.
So Georgia is 7-1. 3 of their 7 wins are clunkers, and one of their losses is to a team that is not as good as we thought it was, in Alabama.
Right. But if Alabama beats LSU next week, then it's probably forgiven. Or, I mean, the Georgia loss is fine as long as Georgia got 1 loss, they're fine. Like if they go to Ole Miss and lose, and then they have to come back and have a must win against Tennessee, then I start to worry about that.
Well, it also makes you question whether or not, when you like with Ole Miss playing well, if Georgia should be like just an afterthought in terms of winning both of those games. Like I think that they are susceptible to losing one right now.
I do
and like
too.
Tennessee
I do
isn't
too.
lighting the world on fire, but if Ole Miss is feeling really good about itself and they put a game together, like Georgia needs to show up or they're going to lose.
Ole Miss and Georgia play the way they did on Saturday, next Saturday, Ole Miss will win the game. Georgia has to play the way it played against Texas.
Yeah. And try to get to at least 85% of the way it played against Texas against other teams. I know it's not easy to fire your team up and have them ready to play like it's a prime time, 3 versus 4 matchup on national television. But like, it's just like Georgia did not even look interested in playing the game today. It was weird. Like they just,
it was very strange. And Carson Beck just making throws into really contested windows. Like they had some wide open throws and he made those just fine. But anytime there was any sort of dirty pocket, he's panicking and throwing into triple coverage, and it doesn't make any sense. Like,
and they show him on the bench and he's just sitting there. It looks like his dog just died. Like, I mean, it's like, come on, man, you gotta
there was
wake
the
up.
moment where he comes to the sideline and Kirby Smart like puts his arms around him and he was talking to him. I was wondering because it kind of looked like Elko talking to Connor Wegman last week in the A&M LSU game, and that was when he benched him. But he didn't do that. Kirby Smart didn't do that. He stuck with Carson Beck, and I get it. Now, it would have taken something because Gunnar Stockton's the number 2 quarterback at Georgia. I was just imagining a scenario that would happen where Jaden Rashada would wind up playing against Florida. That would have been incredibly weird if that had happened.
I would have spontaneously combusted if that happened.
The internet would have spontaneously combusted if that had happened.
My body would have caught on fire from the inside.